Hello, everybody. My name is Nathalie Gontier, and very welcome to the fifth webinar of the Applied Evolutionary Epistemology Lab. This webinar is co-hosted by Elena Chebotareva from from Saint Petersburg University, and the topic of today is going to be on transhumanism. And so we have two speakers today: Natasha Vita More, who is the co-founder of Transhumanism Plus, and also Elena Chebotareva and Lada Shipovalova are going to be talking also on transhumanism. And so Elena is here with us, and Lada is going to join us later for the Q&A, because at the moment Natasha is in America, and so there it is morning, and Elena is in Russia, and there it is evening. So this is really across nations at the moment. So Elena, please.
Yeah, thank you, Natalie. Dear all, now I present my talk with my colleague Lada. We both work in St. Petersburg University at the Department of Philosophy and Techniques, Philosophy of Science and Techniques. I think I will use the record. I apologize for the quality of the record, but however, it was only one possibility to do it with Lada. I hope Lada join us later on. And as I understand, I also should introduce with great pleasure our co-speaker, Natasha Vita More, co-founder of Transhumanism, famous author and former professor.
Thank you. Would you like for me to start now?
Yeah, Natasha is the first speaker. Probably Natasha can share her screen.
Yes, thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you, Ilana, and thank you, Natalie, and everyone who's involved in this incredible program. Applied Evolutionary Epistemology is a very timely topic, so let's get started here. What I'd like to start out with saying is, it's essential, especially within the scope of the philosophy of transhumanism, to change what needs to be changed. But how do we determine what needs to be changed? Who is the voice that says this needs to be changed or that doesn't need to be changed? And that is precisely what I'm going to address in my talk. The factors that help us determine what needs to change from a moral perspective or a personal system outside general ethics of sciences and technologies are as straightforward as gut feeling. You know, you get that feeling, that emotional reaction, or by identifying illogical assumptions and irrational opinions. And the patterns are often considered constants, yet those are ever-changing models that set a standard of behavior by which we consider normal or normalcy. And we've overcome that through the postmodernist rhetoric largely, and through a better understanding of transhumanism, where binary systems are something that need to be addressed versus multiplicity, and that knowledge needs to keep on evolving and growing. There is no perfect, there is no set of absolute intelligence. So to be fair, we can say that the only constant is change itself. But the problem of that consistency of change is how have things become incompatible properties and yet remain the same thing. So we need things to remain the same as well as change. And here's that dilemma or that schism in thinking. I'm going to approach this through academics and through scholars and some of their work that have fallen by the wayside because the ability to distinguish fact from fiction or opinion from reliable knowledge is very clear. So in this talk, I will address two issues and examples of opinion used to leverage theoretical findings or suppositions within specific fields. And I'm going to show that as post-humanism, through the postmodernist perspective, has obfuscated information or knowledge and altered it to fit a certain mimetic sensibility that has infested academics as well as the mainstream. So I will start my presentation now, and then I'll click back to it. So excuse me just a moment as I do this. I'm going to share screen for you all. Okay, here we go. Thank you so much. So my talk is Change what needs to change, leave the rest alone. So how do you do that? By focusing on what affects you. And again, the smartest indicator we can have for what affects us is our gut feeling, our intuition, and our ability to identify irrationality or false information. Let's call it the over politicizing or polarization of knowledge. So I'm going to give you two quotes here that I think are very paramount to this whole entire field of the epistemology of evolution in regards to cybernetics and artificial intelligence, or through the lens of transhumanism. The first one is Lynn Margulis, who is an evolutionary biologist, or was, and she says that evolution is no linear family tree, but change is a single multi-dimensional being that has grown to cover the entire surface of the earth. And we can apply that to knowledge as well. And Margaret Mead, of course, is one of the co-intellectuals of second order cybernetics. And her quote is, "A small group of thoughtful people could change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has." And so that brings the reliance of information back to the individual and as community. And as Natalie says in many of her lectures on this field, it's very important to look at community and communication. So it's like climbing a mountain to the summit, where the summit keeps on advancing as we advance. And while we can apply systems thinking to this, there'll always be that tactile sensibility, that gut reaction of what we are driven for, where our passion is. And then the strategic planning of how do we approach this through rational, considerate and intelligent ways, and to have a vision, to have a visionary understanding of the plausibility of change. And the more we reach that summit of what we think is the truth, the more we'll see there's less truth, because truth is not a static thing. Now, here I'd like to mention that the factors that help us determine what needs to change are, as I said earlier, straightforward, as identifying that gut feeling, what doesn't work, identifying illogical assumptions, and witnessing irrational opinions. So the 2 points I'm going to make in this talk are, number one, and I'll just read this for you here, it's on the slide. An opinion concerning Norbert Weiner's work within the field of cybernetics and his personal beliefs of humanism, which would embody his moral understanding within the system as a variable. So while cybernetics applies system thinking, and it is a system, and second order is a system, being an observer within the system, the idea of in any person's individual moral beliefs must be part of that system. It is a variable. It's not contrary. It is not a contradiction. It is part. In his book, Human Use of Human Beings, Weiner sought to identify morality in the machine, not the converse. The second issue that I'm going to bring up is an opinion concerning Alan Turing's imitation game, also known as the Turing Test, influenced the theoretical assumption that advanced computer technology of artificial intelligence will lead to disembodiment of humans. Those are my two core issues. Now, I'd like to state that cybernetics and the core of applied evolutionary epistemology form a symbiosis of human needs through computers and algorithms. Of course, we know that. Margaret Mead characterized cybernetics as a way of looking at things as a language for addressing what one sees and to embrace the context of its social consequences. And in fact, Mead advocated a move from the early first order cybernetics to where it becomes embodied. So you're already starting to see that that embodiment is an inclusivity, a multiplicity, an ever-growing evolution of ideas and variables within any systems that converge or disassemble, but they're still part of even a larger system. All right, next slide. Okay, now, I've heard Natalie refer to punctuated equilibrium, and I think it's relevant to applied evolutionary epistemology at the point where human biology and technology intermingle and can cause a sudden burst of information shocks. These shocks can force a system to adapt or reorient, feedback and control, or leave the system and either attempt to dismantle these shocks or move to new communities that intentionally reject or ignore the shocks. Now, by shock here, I mean the largest and most abundant and exponentially growing and potentially riskful mechanism, which is social media. Social media and the polarization of news through politicization are giving us shocks moment to moment. The television provides so many news channels. The radio program provides so many news channels. And Facebook, any of our Instagram, our email lists, the internet itself, and the Internet of Things itself all form this system of information that is sending signals to us through data exchange, through influencing the way we think, which is a veil that is something that I have deep concern about. It's not this that is part of those two core issues that I'm going to talk about, but through those two core issues being misrepresentations of knowledge, it is continues to be dismantled and disseminated into the public, not just academics, but in the mainstream vis-a-vis opinion. So how do we learn to adapt to change and counter these riptides of shocks that affect us both on a gut level and on an intellectual level where we're going, that is absurd, that can't be true? To find issues. And what I did for this talk was to find two issues that get my goat or put my teeth on edge or cause the hair on the back of my neck to curl. Okay, the first one, as I mentioned earlier, the misappropriation of cybernetics and Norbert Weiner's moral belief or personal commitment to his right to have humanism as something he believed in. And the second one is Alan Turing's imitation game. And the counter to that the postmodernist agenda considers that this was the very beginning, the onset of disembodiment of the post-human. So I'm going to read from my paper here because I think that's best as I have the slide in front of you. And I'll just get to the point here. Okay. The ground zero, liftoff at this summit to the mountaintop. The basic method of communication today is through patterns of information in sending and receiving through cell phones, of course, text messages, emails, and URLs. People rarely, if ever, purchase items, communicate with a friend, or see professional assistance through one-on-one personal communication, tactile communication. That is associated to a computer chip. This microchip, let's call it, is everywhere. It's in our, it has become the nervous system of all of humanity in the advanced world, and especially developing further and further, more exponentially in growing countries as they develop more microchips. The point is it controls almost every electronic device known to the world. It is in computers, phones, satellites, home electronics, aircrafts, cars, hearing aids, and even diabetic systems. So therefore, it has become biomedical. So it's not just around us in our communication and transportation devices, it's in our biomedical field. To opt out of this would alienate a person from society altogether. And it's cultural evolution. The strong currents that cause tidal flows of information that affect knowledge is not confined to oceanic inlets, but has become a global ocean of data. This data might be controlled or influenced by the big tech companies, for example, Facebook, Google, Instagram, etc. But it also might be controlled and influenced by news media outlets and the presence of the Internet of Things. Outside of the microchip's presence, in the human adaptation of beliefs through mimetic warfare, through dissemination of ideas and social networks aimed to confuse, misinform, and disrupt society. Now, that's not all a bad thing. Disruption can be a good thing, and we need that change. Change is welcomed. And part of the transhumanist scope is that adaptation, evolution to the change means around us. In fact, mimetic engineering stemmed out of a transhumanist science fiction book from Richard Dawkins, The Selfish Gene. So it's all integrated there. Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs puts human health at the core of it. But let's now go specifically and directly to the two issues that got my goat. Okay, Firstly, an example of concern as expressed in the book, How We Became Posthuman by scholar and author N. Catherine Hales, identifies a contradiction, as she states, in the seminal cybernetic theory of Norbert Wiener and his personal values. And I'll quote here, envisioning powerful new ways to equate humans and machines, yet speaking up strongly for liberal humanism values. So, but why is this a contradiction? Cannot Norbert Wiener have had his deep commitment to his work in cybernetics and also have a commitment to his moral beliefs in humanist thinking? Cannot transhumans and or posthumans augment, enhance, integrate, work with machines through artificial intelligence, automation, robotics, nanotechnology to improve biological homeostasis, ecological systems, and traditional liberalism and modern liberals who express humanist or even transhumanist values? So where is the controversy? I claim that that controversy was a supposition based on a need to try to turn the postmodernist rhetoric of posthumanism into something that says that we became posthuman because of humanist views. So that we could say because of transhumanist views. So to counter that is my second issue. So in my second issue, I'll state that apart from fabricating the flaw of contradiction between Norbert Wiener's work and his personal beliefs, a separate but related miscalculation arises in Anne Catherine Hale's interpretation of Alan Turing's imitation game, or known as the Turing Test. As a fundamental big leap, let's call it a shock to the fundamental idea of disembodiment of the human. Well, this miscalculation is clever, but interprets signals of computer code as equal to human agency and therefore capable of tossing out the body with the bathwater. While this observation does distinguish code functioning from neurological synapses and consciousness, it misses the point that code is a variable within the system of the exo-body agency. Putting this point aside, the imitation game was established as a well thought out scenario, very carefully arrived at, and aimed to test whether a person could discern the difference between communicating with a computer or a machine and a human being. So, well, what's the point of that? Why is that an issue? And I'll quote from Hales. Could I have a time check, please, Elena? Am I okay? You're muted, so I'll just go on and put your hand up when you need me to stop. Thank you.
You're fine. You still have around 10 minutes.
Perfect. Okay. And I'm going to quote Hales here in due respect for her scholarship. And she is someone I do respect. And this is not a dismantling of her beliefs. It's a dismantling of her assumptions that form the basis for her beliefs and how we became posthuman. So Hales says here, vis-a-vis the Turing test or the imitation game, at the inaugural moment of the computer age, the erasing of embodiment is performed so that intelligence, in other words, artificial intelligence, become a property of the formal manipulation of symbols rather than the enaction in the human life world. The Turing test was to set the agenda for artificial intelligence of the next 3 decades. In the push to achieve machines that can think, researchers performed again and again the erasure of embodiment at the heart of the Turing test. All that matters was the formal generation and manipulation of information patterns. Well, that is absolutely not true. Alan Turing himself was a very strong advocate of moral beliefs, of rights, of human rights, of the dignity of human rights, and his own personal beliefs. As a homosexual, had the right for plurality, multiplicity, and diversity within genetic makeup and mimetic engineering. So in sum, Hale's interpretation lures us into the theme of erasure of embodiment vis-a-vis how we became posthuman, the disembodied human, which is one of the key arguments against the transhuman, that the transhuman just wants to be an upload, which is absolutely incorrect on all counts. But in fact, it's a false goal of the imitation game. And while the interpretation is effective in its intention, outside the specific intention, the interpretation lacks prudence or even soundness. Let's apply the situated scenario with different criteria in a current issue we face today: racism, bias, and inequality. Not being able to see, to visualize another person you are interviewing or being in a relationship or even in conversation or communication with affords a certain sense of comfort, of potential fairness. You can't see them, therefore you can't judge their race, their ethnicity, what they look like, etc. Otherwise, if the machine or human, for example, were of a certain ethnicity, gender, age, physical look, sexual preference, then the machine or human would most likely fall prey to preconceived judgments and interpreted differences than if it's behind a curtain or a separate room. So the entire argument of the imitation game and the Turing test, that because we can't see it, we therefore are disembodied on the one hand. On the other hand, that the imitation is a bad thing for humans because machines should not imitate humans. Well, we're imitating ourselves. And I'm going to read you this quote. Imitation may be defined as behavior and selectively duplicates that of another person. Like symbolism, it is a basic capacity that is inherent in human nature. Further, imitation is also a form of social learning that leads to the development of traditions and ultimately cultures. It allows for the transfer of information, behaviors and customs, etc., between individuals and down generations without the need for genetic inheritance. So to return to my core theme here, change is necessary. How do we change what needs to change? And I think that the best way we can do that is through individual compassion and understanding, and even a disconnect with the information that's around us, to find something in our field that may rub us the wrong way or put our teeth on edge or excite us and be a wonderful adaptation or adaptation of ideas. But if that adaptation and adaptation of ideas goes awry and uses ideas to misinterpret them, to build a theory such as posthumanism through the postmodernist perspective, then I think that needs to be addressed, because it is not only inconsistent with the expansion of knowledge and evolutionary epistemology, it is in conflict with the entirety of values and integrity of knowledge on the front. So I hope through my talk I've given examples of not only the sharing of knowledge and the exponential growth of knowledge, but the fact that if we change what needs to be changed within our own fields and our own understanding, that will have a larger impact. And it ties back into the original quote, as I stated, from Margaret Mead, that change has happened, it's occurred largely through the effects of people. A small group of thoughtful people could change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. And I think that this is what this particular session has done, and the work of applied evolutionary epistemology as a field can do. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Natasha. And now we have time for questions.
If you have questions, then just please raise your virtual hand or just ask your question if you want. Also, welcome to the people that just joined us. Here, there's a question from Dennis, please. Go ahead, Dennis Noble.
Thank you. I'm fascinated by this presentation on transhumanism and the idea that we can somehow or other be uploaded. One of the reasons why I have felt that AI is rapidly approaching something of a dead end is that I think that the potential for doing in silicon chips what biology does with organisms based on water, it leads to a very severe limitation of what conceivably silicon chips could do. And the reason for that is very simple. It is that the silicon chip components, they're fixed. Of course, the programs and the data are variable and change with time. But if that means if you want to introduce a stochastic element, you actually have to put it in. You have to put a random number generator in or something similar. Whereas in the embodied human, you don't need to do that because the water-based nature of the components will necessarily mean that all the molecules that are the equivalent of the transistors and so on in your computer system are just moving around the whole time. So you can harness stochasticity in its completely natural form. And I don't see any way in which the silicon way of representing the information that is us, if you want to put it that way, our knowledge, could conceivably do that. And I wonder whether that point, that is the difference between fixed silicon type representation of the embodiment, if you want to call it, of knowledge, and the naturally water-based embodiment that is organisms as we know them. I wonder whether that has entered into this discussion of transhumanism and the possibility of upload of you and me. That's my question, really. I'm unfamiliar with the field you're describing, so I'm asking this question as a naive biologist.
Oh, no, that's not naive at all. In fact, it's quite astute. Firstly, transhumanism is not about uploading. That's conjecture. The one result of human evolution is very focused on backing up memory, dementia, early onset Alzheimer's. These diseases of memory loss is very serious for all of humanity. So with that in mind, the biomedical field of looking at neurology and how to understand the synapses, the communication in neural networks of the brain to restore faulty neurons or faulty dendrites and synapses is a very prominent field that is advancing. So the relationship between that, which is totally separate and something very needed in society for all of humanity, those of us getting older can understand this. And if you've experienced a parent or a relative or friend who's had dementia, it's horrifying. So that's one area. The area that transhumanism ties into that is an early understanding within the transhumanist rhetoric that unless we back up the brain, we could forever lose our memories. And for longevity, whether you live to 90 or 100 or 200, in the biological water-based body or in a prosthetic body, which many people do have prosthetic limbs. And I wouldn't say that just because it's not water doesn't mean that their limbs aren't natural or real. So I just wanted to make that point, and I think you understand that. But it's very important because longevity and the continuity of identity is crucial to the core theme of transhumanism. And looking at it logically, the idea would be, well, if we back up our computers and we're backing up information, then let's back up our brains as well. And that is a very daunting and complex field, but there are many different neurologists and computer scientists and companies working on it. And hopefully there will be advances, not just for transhumanists to back up our brains, for our bio bodies or other bodies, but for those who are suffering from dementia, memory loss, Alzheimer's, etc. Did I answer your question? I think the key thing there was the water base versus silicon base. Well, because we're animals, we have a water-based system, but our prosthetic limbs are not water-based. So we've already merged with that non-water-based silicon. And I think that all the people that are walking around with prosthetic arms and legs, I salute them for showing them off and being proud of them and accepting them as appendages to their water-based body rather than seeing them as something awful or dreaded. But thank you, excellent question. Thank you so much.
Very much for that. It's a beautiful clarification, because I'd obviously misunderstood. The uploading is more a sort of an aid, much like the artificial limb. It's as it were an artificial memory that one hopes could, and I see the logic now, deal with dementia. Well, that would be absolutely marvelous. I've no quarrel with that whatsoever. My main point is that what I see as being the limits to AI in completely replacing us. That's where I see a big problem.
Yeah, and I agree with you there. I'm not, and transhumanism doesn't say that we're all going to become AI. In fact, it doesn't even see AI as a friend. That's why some transhumanists have written about friendly AI or FAI. Some transhumanists have written about the existential risk, like Nick Bostrom and Andrew Sandberg. Myself and others have really taken an ardent look at what happens if AI goes wrong. So rather than fighting it, because it's happening, and it is a field, and almost every university has not just an AI department in their computer sciences school or schools of computer science, they also have machine learning and new subsets of AI learning. So there's narrow AI, strong AI, AGI, and it's going to continue growing as robotics is continuing to grow. So it's something to not put our heads in the sands, but I love the fact that you bring this up, because we need to know about it. And even here, we need to change what can be changed. What we can change is the level of ethics, and make sure that the machine ethicists are not the same as the bioethicists who said no more stem cells, no more this, no more that, because they didn't understand stem cells. Well, now stem cells is a major industry in biomedical research and development, and almost probably everyone you know has either had stem cells injected or is thinking about it if they have, any bodily, injury or malfunction. So I think what we need is that a better understanding of the epistemology of evolution of knowledge in order to understand how we can better look at AI, not through a staunch morality of ethics, but a clear objective ethics. So the transhumanist perspective there, just to cut to the chase, is that we will probably merge with AI as we're merging with robotics for prosthetic limbs that help us. But we will have indeed safety nets and safety zones and warnings, and we need far more advanced thinking and protocols for how much too far, too fast. And yeah.
Very good. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Are there more questions?
Elena.
Yes, if I may, I would like to ask a question about, again, embodiment, but also extended cognition. I wanted to ask if transhumanism, what the relationship between transhumanism and the extended mind thesis, and if a way to merge with technology is also through an extended mind framework, an extended mind approach. I don't know if these two themes are converging on some conclusion or not. I was just wondering about that.
Yes, well, historically, the brain-computer interface project, which was early von Forster and other cyberneticists at the University of Illinois, took a look at the brain and the computer integrating, and they lost their funding because it was too early on, didn't have the skills and the capabilities, but the vision was there. Very early on, but it wasn't until the Media Lab at MIT with Marvin Minsky and John McCarthy who started taking a look at neural networks and human-computer interaction as far as neurology in that lab. Today, it's really changed. There's so many different companies and researchers who are looking at the integration of the machine and the brain, or the computer and the brain. So yes, transhumanism supports the human biology adapting, adopting, and evolving with technology, as long as it's ethical-based technology and evidence-based science. So those are the qualifiers. Now the quantifiers, the numbers or merits or units would have to be based on something else. So that would be more quantifiable, how much good can come out of it versus how much bad. So in doing that, we'd have to apply perhaps the proactionary principle, which looks at all sides of the issues, rather than the precautionary principle, which puts the entirety of the burden of proof on the new technology. So from the transhumanist perspective, merging with technology is consequential to our evolution, if not essential. Just like we merge with fire, we need microchips. The other thing is that the idea of the brain and cognition and expanded cognition is very transhumanist in scope. In fact, I think that a lot of the seminal ideas in that regard stem out of the early transhumanist community in the 1990s with Marvin Minsky, who was involved with us, and Eric Drexler of nanotechnology, Robert Freitas of nanomedicine, which is extremely consequential to technology and cognition, as well as Andrew Sandberg as a neuroscientist, and many others, to be sure. The idea is that human cognition is not working as fast and as seamlessly as we would like. We rely on our computers to help us with our memory, our calendar, our dates, just help us record our information. So we've already become incredibly integrated with our computers and our smart devices. So we've already expanded, and I call it the exocentral nervous system. So the zeros and ones around us have afforded an expansion of our cognition in the applied functionality of the brain. If you're talking about consciousness, that's something different. So let me just stop here. Did I answer your question, or did I miss?
Yes, thank you. I was actually talking about the divide on philosophical issues about internalism and externalism and the extended mind thesis in that direction. But your answer your answer really clarified what I wanted to
and
ask.
I think that when we talk about you offered a plurality there. It's one or the other. It's you're either embodied or integrated, or it's extended out of body over there. But I think we need to look at the body as being a system that is water-based, as Dennis discussed, and is also zeros and ones and including the information, because our bodies are continually signaling information through our central nervous system to our peripheral nervous system to our, what I call our exonervous system. So this whole nervous system, going back to my talk, is part of the information data. And one area to be very careful about, what I'm concerned about, as well as existential risk and issues of the ecology and runaway gray goo and all of that, is these sharp accelerated sparks of wrong information or misinformation that gets carried around, like in Catherine Hale's, in all due respect for her misappropriation of Norbert Weiner's cybernetics versus his humanism. They shouldn't be in conflict. Why are they in conflict? And also that the Turing test, that imitation is something that we shouldn't be doing. We shouldn't have machines imitate any part of human, but we already see our prosthetic limbs imitating a real natural biological wet limb. And that is so much needed for those people who have lost their limbs. So I think that this whole section, we've gone so far beyond postmodernism into the transhumanist scope, where we've let go of dualism, not dualism necessarily, but binary thinking. That's what I'm saying. I'm sorry, excuse me, I got that wrong. This binariness of one or the other, black, white, right, wrong, in-body, out-body, disembodied, embodied. We need to have a language that seeks beyond that. And I think that systems thinking is probably, in my limited understanding, the best solution. along with, because systems thinking is extremely complex, along with taking a look at our gut feelings, our reactions to misinformation, how in our field, when someone, something misappropriates the integrity of knowledge and the hard work of many to use it theoretically or by conjecture to make an assumption that will sway the information or knowledge of others towards a particular worldview, is in my understanding as a scholar and as an academic, something that we need to face, not to get angry at or to fight, but to say, let's stop it. And I think that the best way to stop it is by being proactive and just get the right information out, because you can't fight the big system, and a big system is academics. A big system is the postmodernist rhetoric within academics. And I think that the more we understand the transhumanist agenda and other, inclusive understandings of this diversity and the change of what needs to change, the better we will become as thinkers, as scholars, and be more willing to find the bright side of light. I know that sounds mundane, but I think that there can be positiveness, and I want it so much, and I hope for it, with all the nonsense and bad news and shocking horrors of hate speech. We need it so much,
Okay, we have some more questions, but I believe we already have not so much time. Yeah, so we have just time for short question.
Well, if I could come back in, I found this extremely enlightening. We, after all, have had external help to our minds for a very long time. In fact, ever since we started writing and inscribing, it's a very important philosophical point too, because if one asks the question, where exactly is the mind? I think it's a deep neurophysiologist conceit to say that it's inside here. It's out there. We have for thousands of years accumulated and interacted with other humans to create the cultural environment we're in. I mean, from an evolutionary perspective, this makes a lot of sense. So my initial naivety is changing to a degree of enthusiasm.
How delightful.
I also have a quick question. I think we can do one more question. In regard to that, I like it very much that you link transhumanism to systems theory, where it most certainly has that origin as well, and where that grows into theories on extended mind and also on niche construction. But I also like it very much that you associate it with symbiosis and with punctuated equilibria. And in that regard, I wanted to ask for a clarification about what you meant in particular when you said that there is this connection between transhumanism and punctuated equilibria and the level of the community there that is engaging in very fast interactions and in a very fast pace of cultural evolution. And so I just wanted to listen more to what you wanted to say about that.
I love the idea of punctuated equilibrium, because it reminds me of the concept of whether the technological singularity is going to be one big exponential shift, like upward, and we hit a wall, or if it's in surges. And if we look over time, change usually happens in surges. Yeah, there's spikes, and then settle down, digest throughout societies around the world, then spikes and digest. So I think that the punctuated aspect of it is where we hit a point where we go, oh, okay, we're there. And I think that we've hit a point where we're going, okay, we had COVID-19, it's there. Now we're waiting another point. Okay, when are we going to take off our masks? Or yes, I have to get the vaccine. So if you look at, different timeframes of what happened, take World War II. The United States not getting involved in World War II, and they were warned over and over again, come help Europe, come help Europe. And all of a sudden there was that punctuated equilibrium where it hit a threshold, and all of a sudden the US said, we got to help, we got to get involved. So it's those moments of change. And even in our individual lives, we see where we have to have a pivot in our behaviors in order to survive or do the right thing. I see it tying into the transhumanist scope because transhumanism has been around. I wrote the manifesto in 1983. So how many years is that? That's a number of decades. When I wrote the manifesto, it was primarily looking at human and technology to expand, human, as a being, as a consciousness, as, a life. And of course, because I was very ill and I didn't want to die. And I thought these bodies are so vulnerable. We need to increase the durability, the sustainability of the human body. So, okay, fast forward to where we are today. It took a while for transhumanism to break through the ivory ceiling of academics because the postmodernist rhetoric was kept on kicking it to the curb. And there's the book Transhumanism and Its Enemies or whatever. I have it in my bookshelf. It's that came out, and Catherine Hales is in that, along with Don Iden and a number of other scholars. But it's the misappropriation of information. And finally, transhumanism has hit a punctuated equilibrium over the past, I would say, decade with artificial intelligence. We thought it was going to be either nanotechnology or AI because both of the key figures or founders of those, let's say the fathers of AI, the father of nanotech, Marvin Minsky and Eric Drexler, we were all together kind of like at a Macy's event saying which will happen first. AI happened first. So that is a punctuated equilibrium within transhumanism. The ideas that we talked about through the 1980s and 1990s and earlier in the 60s and 70s finally got to a point where it was realized. Of course, a lot of fear came from it and still is from it. But that is one part to answer your question. The other part of your question was punctuated equilibrium with the sparks of communication. Right now, we're experiencing, and I think everyone is pretty much drenched in the obfuscation of integrity of information through social media opinions, and everyone has an opinion. And if you look at the units of information that are accurate based on primary reliable sources, and the units of information that are based on hearsay or retweeting or reposting or cutting and pasting of information without citations or credit has grown so much. So we're seeing that as well. And I think that, to me, is as unnerving as any type of other existential risk, because knowledge is precious. And as Dennis was saying, we've had this expanded consciousness and cognition forever, since the pictoglyphs at the caves in Lascaux, France, extending to the Sumerians, writing on stone tablets. We've expressed ourselves through different modalities. And to have that erased, or call it a cancel culture of history, or to obfuscate information, to manipulate, is something that, to me, is another existential risk. And did I answer your question fully, or what did I leave out?
Well, yeah, so that I think, yes, because you link that to the idea of punctuated equilibrium, because punctuated equilibrium is also very much about, this phase of equilibrium where there is like a period of stasis. And then in many ways, like what is being argued is that if you have an imbalance in the system, you have a rapid change to get to a new period of stasis. And so in that regard, I think this is something like transhumanism, I think, is something that is also considered very disruptive by many people. And sometimes transhumanism is blamed as that what is causing the disruption, while here it is very clear that you make this distinction on the one hand between artificial intelligence and transhumanism, for example, because there is indeed at this moment a disequilibrium in society going on because of the technological revolutions that we are undergoing. Everybody's on Twitter, everybody's on Facebook. We don't know how to use these new media, but these are the media. That's not transhumanism. That is like two different sides of the coin that are making this disequilibrium that we are trying to get into equilibrium with. And so in that regard, that's what I was thinking when I heard you say that.
What I think, to respond to that, I think that transhumanism, if I look at it objectively, remove me from having written the manifesto or, you know, worked hard on the movement for years, just as an outside observer, remove me from that system, looking at it, we're in deep doo-doo. Unless we learn how to deal with this and find a changing stasis that is homostasis, rather than stasis, I'd rather have a homeostasis of existence that learns how to pad those shock waves of misinformation that's out in those vehicles that you mentioned. We need better critical thinking and visionary thinking. We need to learn how not to be afraid of change, to accept change, to address rather than gossip or be or, you know, badmouth, get angry, or be, you know, hide our feelings, put it out there, challenge, but challenge in a way that is more scientifically articulate, more honorable, and just say, no, that's incorrect. Let's look where the incorrection lies. I think a lot of people are afraid to do that, especially with some heady scholars, like people are afraid to counter maybe Ray Kurzweil. Well, Ray Kurzweil is a friend and someone, if I disagree with him, I will certainly counter. And, or, you know, these icons that we hold up, like Donna Haraway, I think she got the cyborg totally wrong. I'd rather be a transhuman than a cyborg. And that is in the Transhumanist Manifesto. Donna Haraway took the cyborg beautifully in a feminist sensibility and in a socialist sensibility, beautifully articulated, very thematically fascinating, and but took the concept of the cyborg away from Nathan Klein and Manfred Klein and obfuscated its true meaning as for augmenting the human for zero G and you know, solar rays and you know, degeneration of the body if we go out into space, and turned it into a salvo, a manifesto for I would rather be a cyborg than a feminist or a goddess. I mean, rather than a goddess, because a goddess was somehow held up as tits and ass or an icon for men. And that's not what a goddess is in the first place. In the second place, her salvo is really more about the transhuman, but it's too political for me. And I think that a cyborg, I'd really rather give the homage to the cyborg as a man machine, not a human machine. And yes, back then, gender politically correctness was not used. If you look at all the old writings, they're all about men or man rather than humans or him and her or they. So, but I think across the board, I think that you especially can do an enormous amount of work in this area, but I think transhumanism is needed for the main fact that the philosophy is based on the ability to question one's own thinking, to understand change, to see that there is a diversity of views and that the symbiosis of those views, not the collectiveness, but the symbiosis of those views can form more knowledge and a more articulated sensibility of the world around us, rather than being sequestered to these little philosophies or worldviews or movements. So transhumanism actually would like to see a no need for transhumanism, you know.
Thank you very much, Natasha. Let's continue this discussion during the breakout rooms. Now let's go over to Elena. Thank you very much, Natasha. So Elena is going to talk also about transhumanism, and she has prepared a talk for her, and also of Lada Shipovalova, who is going to join us during the question round, because it is night at this moment in Russia, and then it was morning in America. So, you know, we are happy that we were able to combine this. So Elena is a researcher at Saint-Petersburg University in the Department for Philosophy of Science and Technology, and she's also a member of the Russian Society for History and Philosophy of Science, and she also works on transhumanism and also on social science development in the context of digitalization. And then Lada Shipovalova, she is the head of the Department of Philosophy of Science and Technology, also at St. Petersburg University, and she's a member of the Russian Society for the History and Philosophy of Science, and also of the Academy of Science in Russia. So, Elena, please.
Can we assume that technological progress, including a variety of engineering artifacts, evolves in accordance to a biological program? In our industrial revolutions, innovation and intentions are in fact controlled by its invisible hand. If we produce techniques that is unprecedentedly superior to our biological capabilities, does that mean living the biological game? Why does the technology we produce become a special phenomenon whose existence we are not able to predict and plan to a certain extent? Is it possible to draw a demarcation line between technical and biological? How constructive is it to identify them? Of course, we are not ready to give uncompromising answers to these questions in our talk, but we try not to lose sight of them. Okay, the next slide. Methodological problems. To start with the main problem, probably inherent in all situations of philosophical consideration. When examining the technical, we can't give a clear definition. In the philosophy of technology and in the philosophy of engineering, there is a hot debate about the subject of research. If engineering is a technical phenomenon, but techniques are not identical to engineers, like some philosophers claim, then can we establish the commonality of engineering system, bioengineering systems, or, for example, social engineering systems? Obviously, in this case, we are talking about the implementation of the principles of technical rationality, but this does not give a stable definition to this specific phenomenon. In addition, technical evolution is based on fundamental scientific theories, so it turns out to be difficult. It turns out to be difficult for us to avoid entering into the territory of scientific knowledge and get involved in the discourse on the evolution of epistemic mechanism and epistemic theories, which can be quite far take us away from our original questions. Okay. Due to the fact that it is almost impossible to distinguish between the technical and the social, we face with a number of uncertainties in key questions about technology. For example, how adequate are evolutionary principles in the technosphere, which is a product of human world with its goals and values, while nature is not comparable with such categories? Nature has no reason and goals, non-teleological, blind. This is how we usually evaluate it. And the technique is purposeful and rational. The engineering profession goes back centuries, and it's rooted in ancient corporate codes. Modern interpreters of codes argue about the priority of the responsibility of engineers to their own guild or society, relying on the regulation of goals and values, which underlies technical development for many centuries. However, at the same time, people obey technology and its requirements, and not the other way around, and therefore the technical seems to us a special autonomous phenomenon and is a subject of research. The technical develops not only according to plans and regulations, but also obeys the same evolutionary law as human society. It's important to note that using an evolutionary approach, we must operate with large historically changing cohorts and systems, and not individual indicative cases on which we have full consensus. So the problem of uncertainty does not disappear in any case. Okay, now moving on the next part, we want to talk about the kinship of technical and natural. Without pretending to be a complete or consistent overview of ideas about similarities and differences between the living and artificial, let us list the historical conceptual milestones what are important in our opinion. It's obvious what even antiquity we differentiated the living and the artificial. Then by the beginning of the early modern Europe, we talk about philosophy of mechanism. Okay, next slide. The concept of the world as a huge deterministic mechanism and people and animals as a bio-automats has become widespread. A good example of which is, for example, the works of Descartes, René Descartes. Anthropocentrism has made a significant contribution to the concept of technical objects. It subordinated their development and specificity to the will of human. Thus, one of the first philosophers of technology, Ernst Kapp, proposed the concept of organ projection, relying solely on the anthropological or biological criteria in understanding the technical. The technosphere, according to Kapp, is continuation of the human body and realization of its internal ideas. There is a direct connection between the tools and organs of man. In the tool, man systematically reproduces himself. In Kapp organ projection, simple tools are considered as an extension of human organs, and the shape of the tools comes from the shape of those organs, the continuation of which they are. A carved finger becomes a prototype of a hook, a handful or a hand, a bowl, for example. However, the main value of organ projection, according to Kapp, is not the reflection of individual organs in simple instruments, but a body internal systems and their principle of work in engineering system and constructs. The form of a steam engine has nothing to do with a person, but the functioning of a steam engine, for example, in a locomotive, reveals similarities with the functioning of a living organism. Both need nutrition, the release of waste on combustion products, wear and tear of parts, and then an important part is destroyed, all functions stop and death. As well, we can consider the telegraph, transport system, computers, and the network. We note that the concept of Kapp's organ projection is still relevant when we talk, for example, about computers, virtual assistants, and exoskeletons. The next most important milestone in conceptual understanding of technical and natural was the presentation of society as collective consisting of human and non-human, and the idea of post-humanism. Below we talk with Lada about them in more details. An active presence in the virtual space of a wide variety of biological and technical objects, like an Internet of Things, for example, poses new questions, and the evolutionary approach to this situation looks universal and promising. In addition, due to appearance of artificial intelligence, a thinking machine, we realized the perspective of the naturalness of superhuman mind. A person working with a machine essentially works with nature, comprehends its laws, and uses them in design. Finally, we have one more analogy related similarity between technical and the natural. When we talk about the development of technological progress zones, we use the word climate and niches. In other words, we apply to ecological terminology that is applicable to nature, to living. As an example of such technological niches is Silicon Valley or Skolkovo in Russia. Moving to the next section, let's take a look at conceptual genesis of technology. Karp's concept of technology as organ projection finds its roots deep in antiquity, when technical inventions were viewed as imitation of nature, as a mimicry. But the phenomenon of technical, in our opinion, precisely in modern sense of the term, is born in the alchemical debate of the late Middle Ages. Here we refer to William Newman's article, here in the slide, Technology and Alchemical Debate in the Late Middle Ages. By the 12th century in Europe, they believed, following the ancient Greek idea, that all practices and products of the masters only imitate nature and are limited to this, limited to their imitation. But alchemists, unlike those who belonged to the mainstream of the scholastic tradition, were ready to argue that human art, even taking into account the imitation of the natural processes, could successfully reproduce natural products or even surpass them. In the alchemical context, it was not only the question of whether a person could produce gold by transmutation of metals, but also the question of whether it was permissible to sell such goods. Developing this thought and responding to the criticism of their discipline, the alchemists of the Middle Age presented a clearly articulated philosophy of technology, in which human art rises to a highest level of appreciation that is difficult to find in other works until the Renaissance. We shall find that, Newman says, in the process of justifying this discipline before its opponents, the alchemists and their supporters gave a conscious and articulate defense of technology. Indeed, one of the earliest and most thorough to be found in Latin Christendom. Centuries before Francis Bacon's philosophy of nature, with its draconian decree to put nature to the rack, we find protagonists of alchemy who asserted that man's ability to transform the natural world is virtually unbounded. The justification of human art was not based on vague optimism, however. It was supported by practical observation, analogical reasoning, and Neoplatonizing Aristotelianism. This circumstance of origin says a lot about the mysterious essence of technology. Its concept begins not with the scientific theories, but with the alchemical debate, however, sufficiently rational in their essence to be called medieval futurology rather than mysticism. It's obvious that the dispute between nature and technology is not over and is currently at the new stage of development. Now, we'd like to move on the next section of presentation, Modernity, Models of Biological Evolution in Technological Systems. Speaking about the models of biological evolution in technological systems, we share two spheres. Then scientists think about the evolutionary model in frames of technical disciplines, and philosophical and sociological work in the field of technology research, focused on criticism and reflection. Science technology studies area, STS area. Let us cite as an example several works in which the idea of biological evolution used for constructing technical systems. Here's a new slide. Of course, I have all links for these articles in the slide, but I don't post them because some of them has a lot of authors. Okay, for example, in the article Modeling a New Version of the Protocol, IPv6 as an adaptation of biological evolution, the authors wrote that they drew an analogy between biological evolution and the transition to the new IPv6 protocol. They proposed a systematic modeling method to quantify whether and how IPv6 unfolds within a complex environment context. They applied some biological concepts like survival of the fittest, in very quantitative models of IPv6 transition dynamic process. The dynamic competition between IPv4 and IPv6 protocols has been explored through a biological analogy. I'm sorry, I'm not skilled in these technical protocols, but it's, in my view, a good example of how technical experts are working with the evolutionary model. The next article here is comparing technological development and biological evolution from a network perspective. The title. It looks at technological development and biological evolution from a network perspective. And they find a negative selection at the central nodes of biological networks. But they note that technological networks tend to be opposite to the biological evolution. There is a potential contrast. Biological evolution involves random deviations, while artificial systems change according to rational planning. The authors propose to present biological and technological evolution as an optimization problem. Although systems sometimes use trial and error, both the nature and engineer explore appropriate genotype networks with similar primary goals, but use different criteria to balance constraints. The authors concluded that, as for an optimization process, no single approach optimizes all objectives. In this case, cost effectiveness and mutational robustness and fast trade-offs are inevitable in both biological and technological systems. In general, the authors of this article expect to identify similar results in other technological systems, and they emphasize what in our time engineers have unprecedented opportunities for this. These possibilities provide a perspective to look at biological evolution outside the biological domain as a scene of action, and it may be quite important. It's obvious that the studies which analyze the use of evolutionary biological models in technosystems need an interdisciplinary approach for broader and more reasoned conclusions. One of such work, here it's in the slide, it's an article by Adrian Bejan, I hope it's right pronunciation of his surname, Human Evolution as Biological and Technological Evolution. It based on a number of studies in this area. Bejan is one of the most cited and respected scientists in the world, and his main field of research is technical sciences and applied physics, like thermodynamics, convection, design, and evolution in nature. It's obvious that his knowledge is fundamental and applied science is wide and deep, but we would like to take into account the optics of the philosophy of science in such studies. Homo sapiens, according to Bejan, are human and machine species, and the machine part is constantly evolving on a time scale incomparably smaller than the evolution of the human body. For Bejan, as a physicist, this discipline unites under its roof all existing definitions, old and new, from biology to astrobiology, forms and structures in nature and mechanobiology. The physical concepts of movement and flow are of great importance. The movement of animals and humans, according to Bejan, is a controlled movement. It's movement with vision, knowledge, and expectation, efficient, economical, safe, fast, and forward-looking, purposefully straight. It's opposite of randomness, such as Brownian motion or the collision of particles inside a box. Scaling is also important. The scaling rules for movement and life unite all animals, pilots, runners, swimmers, as well as people and machines for the sea, land, and air. From physics, scaling rules are predictable for body speed, frequency, force, lifespan, and life travel. Bejan notes, okay, here in the slide, the physics of evolution empowers the human mind to fast forward the evolution of its machine part. This, by the way, is what the human mind does with any principle of science. The mind relies on the science to predict features and effects of future phenomena. The urge to know ahead is itself a manifestation of the physics of evolution, because all flowing design, including human movement, is about morphing to flow more easily toward greater and long-lasting success. Bejan understanding of man as a human-machine species in general is not too far from Kapp with his organ projection, also thanks to his illustrations comparing the general shape of a hand in the form of a grip and a wrench. In his article, he gave such a picture. However, if Kapp's concept is characterized by an anthropocentric optics of the study of technology, then for Bejan, this optics is physics and its concepts. If by Kapp man invents technology in his own image and likeness, then in Bejan both man and technology obey the same law, biological evolution, but within the framework of a physical model. For Bejan, science and knowledge are included in the research field as inseparable from technology and universal evolutionary process. From our point of view, Bejan's understanding of the unity of technical and biological evolution lies in the positivist and physicalist area. In this case, we understand positivism as a normative rather than a real view on the human history of knowledge, which is not focused on historical research. In general, such an approach is not entirely wrong, but, as you know, the devil hides in the details, and without detail, such a version of scientific, technological, biological evolution becomes abstract and lifeless. Can we say that the alchemists of the late Middle Ages, who proposed the concept of technology as a plan for making things better in comparison with nature, are obviously representatives of the best and most powerful scientific knowledge, like Bejan called them? How does the model of scientific revolutions proposed by Thomas Kuhn fit into the concept of the evolution, taking into account the real, not abstract actions of scientists, whom a physicist by training also approached the study of the history of science quite systematically and operated with the concept of scientific teams and paradigms. However, his conclusions were fundamentally different. The previous article comparing technical and biological evolution also shows that where paths may differ. It's important to note that views on the evolution of the technosphere, close to the ideas of Kapp and Béjan, force us to reconsider the formulation of the questions of comparing the blind force of biological evolution and rational planning of technological progress. In such concept, there is no space between man and technology, where a single human-machine species, so they can't have separate evolutions in their own laws. Technique ceases to be a result of purely goal-oriented rational design. I feel that now is the turn of Lada. Lada, please. That's your slide, okay?
Yes, thank you. Now let us look at the second area, technology research conducted in the field of STS, Science and Technology Studies. These studies appears to be constructive for us in two respects. Firstly, due to interdisciplinarity, they allow to consider the evolution of a system which includes both humans and technologies. And secondly, they led to overcome the above-mentioned alternative. On the one hand, we naturally consider the formation and development of technologies in the context of the intelligent activities of people, where the technology is just the embodiment of human goals and plans. On the other hand, we can examine human development and human cognition regardless of goals of an evolutionary approach. Let us demonstrate several examples defining such a possibility. Next slide, please.
Okay, I do.
Please, next slide.
Yeah.
Okay. We want to emphasize that evolutionary trends in the area of research, relate to the context of the so-called metaphysics of the process or flow of Gilles Deleuze and Alfred Whitehead. However, some researchers in STS refer directly to evolutionary theories, for example, Darwin's theory. Thus, Andrew Pickering, referring to the philosophy of Deleuze, writes that Darwin allowed us to imagine and therefore to study the becoming. Pickering argues that it is constructive to avoid the separate consideration of the machine's and human's existence, as well as the dependence of one on the other or vice versa. Instead of that, we should focus on the intertwined evolution of humans and non-humans. It is curious that despite the fact that Pickering doesn't allow the possibility to detach the formation of technology from the human, he talks about the difference in the way of becoming of human and mechanisms. Strictly speaking, mechanisms don't evolve. Steam turbines don't transform themselves into power plants. Rather, they degrade. However, we can interpret these processes as simply not fitting into the experience assumed by human. It is also worth mentioning the research in the field of actor network theory by Bruno Latour and Annemarie Moll and others. These studies provide the possibility of considering the joint formation of technologies and humans by the conceptual language. Representatives of the actor network theory follow gray mass semiotics and treat actors or agents as a source of action without attention to their intentionality of or their goal setting. Thanks to this approach, it becomes possible to consider symmetrically in the same terms humans and technologies, where the latter are no less influential than the former. We can find this approach to technology in a number of Latour's prominent texts, or in Moll and Light famous article about on the Zimbabwean pump. This kind of attitude towards technology as active ones is also close to the infrastructure researchers. An empirical analysis of the technology's formation also allows us to get away from the teleological consideration of technologies that exist in the context of a certain social planning. In particular, we can mention the already classic case of the invention of a bicycle investigated by Baker and Pinch. Despite the fact that the study deals with the social construction of a fact, but not its evolution, it is important, firstly, to emphasize the absence of a unified expediency in the formation of a bicycle shape. The authors show how different social groups and different expectations, for example, speed, reliability, and convenience, contribute to the non-linear transformation of models. Secondly, what is important to the authors is a symmetrical history of technology, which means that both successes and failures are considered in the same terms, and that human goals do not make the history. The STS research often tends toward a socially constructivist interpretation of science and technology. But we want to draw attention to a point that in cases where researchers focus on the metaphysical flow or process as a conceptual basis, or on the possibility of symmetrically describing humans and non-humans, or on the uncertainty of the emergence of technology in relation to human intentions, this approach gets closer to evolutionary one. Lena, next slide, please.
This one.
Yes, thank you. I can give an example of study of digital governance technologies conducted by the group of sociologists and me, which demonstrate the opportunities and limits of RNT, actor network theory, as a theoretical framework. The opportunity of actor network theory usually relate to following elements of this theory. First, researchers use the concept of translation that clarifies how to build a working network between participants or of different interests, in our case between citizens, government, experts, etc. Second, INT is often associated with the equal treatment of human and non-human actors. This is called the principle of generalized symmetry. This principle becomes relevant when we consider digital technologies as non-human actors. Third, researchers use the difference between intermediaries and mediators, which demonstrates the changing status of technology that enables citizen participation in governance. Intermediaries transport their forces or voices of participants more or less without transformation. Mediators actualize the difference between actors, make noise, and create problems in the interaction. For description of the changing status of technology, researchers use the fourth concept, fluid technology, as the opportunity to answer different kinds of challenges. In these ways, researchers using INT seek to understand how digital technology governance projects are being realized as a heterogeneous network of actors. Some conceptual elements of this theory, fluid technology, equal treatment of human and non-human actors, and their causality in social relationship might be compatible to evolutionary approach. I would like to emphasize the concept of actor as the one capable of action, but not necessarily having any intentionality. The concept of actor usually comes together with the term agency to describe actors, action, and their effects. In contrast to the agency, the concept of activity presupposes intentionality. The concept of the actor and correspondent agency become problematic when discussing the process of involving citizens in governance. On the one hand, this concept allows describing various participants of governance process without paying attention to their objectives and without building a priori hierarchies between them. On the other hand, those concepts may conceal the fact that some actors who are already empowered may not take into account the objectives of other actors in the governance process. With this concealment, we can't answer the questions of whether the citizens involved in the governance are active, that is, they express their own objectives by their participation, or not. Lena, next slide, please. Thank you. Now I will briefly present some results of this research on the digital platform Active Citizen in Moscow, demonstrating the problem of using concept of INT. Active Citizen is a platform that was created by Moscow government in 2014 to involve citizens in governance. It exists along with Our City platform and crowdsourcing project platform. Using Our City platform, residents turn to the city administration with complaints describing problems that need solution. In the case of crowdsourcing project platform, citizens offer their own ideas related to the improvement of the city for the discussions and decision-making. In contrast to these two platforms, Active Citizen presupposes that not citizens, but Moscow government determines the issues for decision and voting. The problem of activity of the citizens participating in voting arises in the case of Active Citizen platform. Next slide, please. Okay. Active Citizen platform works within the complex digital technological infrastructure for citizen engagement in governance. This structure includes the city government, citizens, social networks, experts, and various administrative authorities. The presence of a variety of actors justifies an appeal to the actor network theory when considering the functioning of this network. The digital platform works in this network as a non-human technological actor. In this network, the platform starts to act as an intermediary, and citizens practice their agency. The trust in the platform depends on the number of implemented decisions made by citizens. However, platform Active Citizen gradually becomes a mediator, which introduces noises to the interaction. It becomes noticeable, arises criticism from users, and calls for improvement actions from the organizers. This happens when suspicions accumulate, and they are voiced not only by citizens, but also by expert community and government actors. Suspicions force the actors who organize the platform to change some of the network operation conditions. For instance, in 2017, they implement blockchain system in Active Citizen. Criticism from residents of the city has grown after the Moscow government in 2017 started using the platform for voting of citizens' property under the renovation program in Moscow. This criticism and suspicions, which lead to the fact that the platform begins to function not as an intermediary, but as a mediator, we can explain only if we take into account how the different actors achieve their different intentions, actualizing not their agency, but their activity. INT actor network theory as a possible representative of the evolutionary approach, which give a theoretical basis for describing the cases of digital governance technologies, may conceal the real hierarchy of actors' intentions because it doesn't pay attention to it. This theoretical strategy can explain how the platform works, but it is insufficient to explain the problems and failures which prevent the implementation of mechanisms for citizens' participation. Now we come to conclusion.
Okay, we're right to conclusions. We want to summarize the main points. Considering the evolutionary principles in technology development requires careful attention to the definition of technology. We love the idea of late medieval alchemists that technology is the capability to make things the same or better than nature does. I believe Natasha Vita More would add something here. In any consideration, it turns out that such a concept is inextricably linked with the social, with its rational and irrational principles, and of course with the sphere of science. Therefore, it turns out to be impossible to consider the technical as an autonomous phenomenon with its own laws. But firstly, we can claim with just at the current level of technical development and can't predict whether this will be so in the future, then artificial intelligence will control most of the processes. Second, attempting such an autonomous view may enable us to look at human evolution from a fundamentally different domain. It's also clear that we need interdisciplinary technology research. Otherwise, we end up with a one-dimensional and flat understanding of processes. STS studies gives the possibility to consider the involvement both of technology and of humans in the context of an evolutionary approach. In this case, firstly, we focus on the metaphysics of the process of law of Gilles Deleuze and Alfred Whitehead, and secondly, focus of ANT assumption that all beings, people, technology, natural objects, can be considered not as a possessing intentionality, but as influenced actors. That's all.
And the next slide, please. It was. Thank you for your attention. Yes.
Okay. Thank you all.
Thank you very much, Elena. I think Lada is also joined us now, right?
Yes, thank you very much.
Hello, Lada.
I'm here and I'm ready to join meeting.
I believe we don't have so much time for questions, because if we want to keep our schedule, we have only 10 minutes. Natalia, am I right?
Well, we can go over a bit. No worries about that. We have time. We have time. Are there questions? I was very interested about that project that you mentioned in Moscow, and are you actively involved as a participant in Yes.
Yes, sure. Yes, sure. I was a leader of this empirical investigation, empirical research, and I just asked my colleagues from sociological department of European University to join and to help me in organizing interview or some
some empirical research because I'm not specialized, but I was the leader of this research.
Yeah, I didn't get that. Yeah. I was also very fascinated about the connection that you make there with Deleuze and with Adrian Béjean. Yeah.
It was the idea of one of the representative of STS, Andrew Pickering, and not only him, because Latour also refers to Whitehead in his studies, and of course these metaphysical theories are very close to evolutionary approach, it seems to me. So for this reason, I appeal to these approaches, these metaphysical theories.
Yeah.
So in context of these theories, we can say on like co-evolution of humans and technologies as non-humans, because we can describe them in equal terms, in the same terms, symmetrically. So
And
that was my.
And you would see that as a co-evolutionary process.
Yeah, it's possible to see. I mean that this theory, for example, ANT theory, has some opportunities to describe technologies and human in equal terms, but sometimes this theory has limits. So my project reveal this as opportunities as limits as well of this approach.
More questions? Well, maybe if there are no more questions, then we can move on to the breakout rooms and we can have some more informal discussion. Okay, so thank you very much, everybody. I want to say that thank you very much to the speakers, to Lada, to Elena, to Natasha. And I also want to say that the next webinar is going to be in June. And then we have James Shapiro and Benedict Hallgrimsson and also Francisco Balzan talking. And that is going to be on the 18th of June. And so now I'm going to stop recording. I just want to say thank you very much. And then we go to the breakout rooms. Bye, everybody.
Yeah. Thank you. Bye.